All right, guys, we are back for another action-packed installment of Mr. Houghton's history class. Today, we are talking about one of my favorite topics. It is the reform movements. You already know Mr. Houghton is super pumped up about this lesson. So, yeah, I'm going to get really loud for this one. Okay, now we are finishing up Unit 7, right? So we've already looked at President Andrew Jackson, all the things he did. We looked at People Moving West, Manifest Destiny, all the land we got. We also looked at all the new technology, the inventions, as well as the Industrial Revolution. But now, it's time to finish up with the major reform movements of the 1800s. Now, we are going to look at 4 different reform movements. We're going to look at the education movement, the prisoner and mentally ill movement, the temperance movement, and of course, the most important, the women's rights movement. All of these movements are occurring in the mid-19th century, so 1800s. We're going to do 2 things with these movements today. We're going to analyze them. That means break them down. Who are they? What did they do? Why did they do it? And then we're going to finish up by evaluating them, right? So like, were these movements successful? Okay, so go ahead and add it to your table of contents. Go ahead and draw your line, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now, it's the 1800s, and Americans are getting more religious again. This is called the Second Great Awakening. They had already had one during the colonial times, right? Americans go to church more, they get more religious. Well, this is 200 years later, and they're doing the same thing. But they start asking themselves, how can we be good American Christians if there's so many people in our country that are being mistreated? And so what a lot of these Americans do, they start clubs, they start organizations, they get together to try and figure out how to make life better for certain groups of people. They're going to write letters, they're going to organize marches, they're going to have protests, they're going to go talk to their government leaders to get new laws passed. All of this is done to improve the lives of other people. These movements are called reform movements, right? The word reform means change. So all these clubs, all these organizations, all these leaders, they were trying to fix the country. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first big one. The first one is the prisoner and mentally ill movement. And I'll give you a little background on this movement. And so there's a nurse. Her name is Dorothy Dix. She's traveling the country. And as she's traveling the country to help sick people, she's visiting prisons. And what she sees makes her sick to her stomach. These prisons are filthy. They are so dirty and unclean. Prisoners are getting diseases. They're getting sick. Prisoners are dying. They're not given enough food to eat. They're being beaten. They're completely being mistreated. They're never given books, right? So they have nothing to do. They don't ever learn anything. And what makes it even worse, some of the people in prison that she sees, they're mentally ill, meaning they might not have even committed a crime, but they were thrown in the prison anyway. Now, for Nurse Dorothy Dix, this is not fair, it is not right, and we can do better. She starts this movement to make their life better. She organizes Americans to push back and say no. Even though these men or women might be guilty, they're still human beings. They still deserve some rights. And no, just because they're mentally ill doesn't mean we can just throw them in some prison and not give them the services they deserve. Now, this movement, it is successful, right? We have asylums and mental hospitals for people who need more help. And of course, our prisons, while not perfect by any means, right? In some cases, they're not perfect enough. They're not good enough. They have improved dramatically, right? Prisoners can go to class in prison. They get better food. They get visitation rights. So they have a lot more rights than they did before. This movement is somewhat successful. I think Dorothy Dix is a hero, right? She's fighting for people that we don't see. She's fighting for people that we have ignored. That's a hero. You're a hero when you fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. All right, let's look at the next movement. It's one that hits you. It's called the education movement. So let me give you the background on this. It's the 1800s. And poor kids do not go to school. Poor kids work on the farm. It's the rich kids that go to school. But here's the problem with that. Think about it, man. If the rich kids go to school, who gets the good jobs? The rich kids. If the rich kids go to school, who makes the money? The rich kids. And the poor kids, their lives don't change. I ask you, is this fair? Horace Mann said no. Horace Mann, he was a teacher, a principal, and then later on he became superintendent in Massachusetts. Horace the Man, I call him the man because of what he did, he said no. He said, we need public schools. We need schools for all kids. That's what makes him the man. Now, this movement is successful. How do we know? You're sitting in a public school. But is this movement over? No, this movement continues because we're still not educating all kids the way we should. Matter of fact, the school you're sitting in, KIPP, was started because we didn't think other public schools were good enough. And so we're trying to give you an excellent education so you could do just as well as those rich kids across the highway. Education movement's still going on today. Our next movement is called the temperance movement. Let me say that again. It is known as the temperance movement. This movement is about banning alcohol. So let's get to the backstory, shall we? It's the 1800s, and men are drinking way too much. They're going to work. They drink at work. And guess what? They're working in all these new factories operating this new technology. Oh, you already know the deal. There's going to be a ton of accidents. Men cut off fingers, they cut off arms, they cut off legs. Some of them are killed in these factory accidents because of alcohol. The ones that live, they go home. Correction, when work is done, they don't go home. You already know where they go. They go straight to that bar. They drink themselves silly, spend all the family's money, then they go home. And their wife is mad. There's no money for food. There's money for the kid. There's no money for the kids' clothes. What's going on? Well, the man, you already know the story. Man beats on the wife. He abuses his wife. He abuses his kids. Destroys the family. So many women are abused. So many kids are abused. So many women and kids go hungry. So many men die, and then there's no one to take care of their family. A bunch of religious leaders get together and they say no. They say this is ridiculous. These men are drinking too much. Alcohol is the devil. We've got to ban it. Alcohol is evil. And a few years later, they convinced our U.S. Congress and the states to do it. We ban alcohol, 18th Amendment. We said no more alcohol in the entire country. It's too bad. But about 12 years later, we decided we miss our alcohol. We bring it back. So this is kind of interesting. We changed our Constitution to get rid of it. Then we changed our Constitution to bring it back. So I guess the question is this. Is the temperance movement successful? I would say yes and no, right? It is successful at first. They get rid of alcohol. But then alcohol is brought back with restrictions, right? So there's an age limit. Age minimum, right? You got to be 21. You cannot drink and drive. You cannot drink and operate heavy machinery, right? So working in the factory and drinking, it's a no-go. And so I think this movement is semi-successful, right? They don't get rid of alcohol totally, right? It's brought back, but at least there's some new rules with it, some new restrictions. All right, perfect. Before we jump into our last move, I wanted to show this meme to you. My kids made it last year. Edwin's on the left. He was one of my top ball players last year. He did not get commended. He missed it by 2, so be better than Edwin. I don't know if anybody at Landrum or KIPP can beat him. Maybe like one kid at Landrum. That's Camilla. She also did not get commended. She missed it by like 4 or 5. I want you to be even stronger than Camilla. She's one of my favorite kids. Always made me laugh. All right, let's go ahead and push forward. Women's rights. Now, this is my favorite of the movements, and I'll tell you why. Women, we all came from a woman. We got to respect our women. Now, what's interesting is women were involved in all the other movements. They were in the education movement. They were in the prisoner mentally ill movement. They were in the temperance movement. But here's the problem. In each of those movements, guess who the leaders were? Men. And all the women are like, pause. We're pushing to fix other people's lives. But maybe we need a reform movement for ourselves. So that's one reason this movement started. The other reason this movement started is because in the 1800s, women are starting to work in factories. And here's the thing. Now that all the women are closer together, they start talking. They start realizing, hey, how come men get paid more than us? Hey, how come men can vote but we can't? Being in close proximity to one another and seeing that men are leading the other movements, they decide to start their own. It's called the women's rights movement. And they're pushing for more rights. One right in particular. They want the right to vote. Now, we're not just going to say the right to vote because we're more advanced than that. We're going to call that suffrage. That's the proper term for it. Women want suffrage, the power to vote. So a quick way to remember this is women suffered for suffrage. They suffered for suffrage. They fought to be given the opportunity to vote. Now, is this movement successful? Yes and no. It's successful, yeah. Women do get the right to vote in 1920. Takes way too long, but it does happen. 19th Amendment, we changed the Constitution to allow women to vote. So they are successful in that regard. But are we done with the women's rights movement? No, right? Women are still not treated the way they should be. And so this is an ongoing movement. Okay. 1848, New York. A bunch of women leaders get together and they have a big meeting. It's called the Seneca Falls Convention. While they're there, they even write a famous document. It's called the Declaration of Sentiments. You already know what they're talking about. Rights, freedom, suffrage, the power to vote. Seneca Falls, 1848. Women are fed up. They want more freedoms. But here's what's sad. They don't get to vote for another 80 or so years. So this movement is a slower one. Okay? Let's take a look at some of their leaders. Now, these 4 women that you see up here on the screen, you drill these 4 into your brain because they are American heroes. Let me say that again. Not just American heroes. These women are heroes. We don't talk about them enough. You know what? We talk about George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson all day, and they're important. They're critical. But we can't ever forget about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony. Like, these women are my heroes. Let me tell you why they're my heroes. Because each one of these 4 women, they fought for women's rights. But let me tell you what makes them a hero. They never get the chance to vote. By the time the 19th Amendment is passed in 1920, these 4 women are dead. Now think about that for a second. Imagine you spend your entire life fighting for something and you never get that opportunity. But you do it. You do it anyway so the next generation can vote. Can you imagine that? You push for something all your life just so your kids and their kids and their kids have that opportunity. That's what we call courage. So I ask you today, as you sit in this classroom working on this PowerPoint, do you have courage? Are you going to do something great so that your kids and their kids and their kids after them can be even more successful than you are? Are you going to be prepared for this test? Are you going to show the same courage that these women did? I hope so. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony. All right, now I showed this meme a couple weeks ago. I think it is hilarious. If you don't get it, yeah, I feel bad for you. You need to get some more studying in, but I do think it's hilarious. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into some speed skills. It's 1 through 15. Number your paper. At the end, I'll give you the answer, so you want to make sure you're right on everything. All right, pause the video if I'm going too fast. All right, number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. Still a major problem today, unfortunately. Number 10. Just had a kid I taught my first year, found out he's more than likely going to spend the rest of his life here because he made a poor decision. Hopefully none of you make the same decision he did. All right. Number 11. Number 12. You can ask Mr. Salgado about this one. Number 13 is Ms. Robinson and Mr. Schmidt's old classroom. Number 14. And number 15. I know this one's a painful image. Okay, here are the answers that you should have come up with. If you got all 15, congratulations, you are ready, you understand this lesson. If you got 12 or less, I would actually spend some time, go back over your notes and then go back through to see if you can get them all right the second time. All right, perfect. Now what you guys are going to actually do is find someone else to watch this part of the video with. You can pause if I'm going too fast. I want you to take a look at the different images. I want you to talk about what the name of the movement is, who the leaders are, and what the image or quote means. So let's take a look at our first one. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Okay. Now that you guys are done with that, you're going to be doing several things. First, I want you to go ahead and jump to your exit ticket. I actually have the answer key, so when you're done, come check your answers with me. Then give me your score. I'll plug it in the gradebook. Then I want you to hop on teamhaughton.weebly.com. Go ahead and knock out both discussion boards, and then you can start your homework. So you have the women's rights reading and finishing your study guide. Talk to you guys later.